Alrighty, so it turns out that I have not learned how to do a vPC yet until today in ACI, so I had to figure out how to do it, so here we are. So I just wanted to run through it real quick. It's actually pretty straightforward. One thing kind of buggered me up a little bit, so I did want to document this for posterity, I guess. I've got a 3560 here in the lab, and I've got ports 21 and 22 connected to ports 117 on both of my leafs in the fabric. On the 3560 side, I just want to show this real quick. Simple trunk port, it's LACP active, and here's my port channel. So nice and easy, nothing interesting there. We can just see, this is the one we're looking at right now. They're independent ports because they're not in a VPC on ACI side, so we're going to configure that. So under Fabric, keep in mind too that this is all not done within a tenant, right? This is done in the global kind of Fabric settings, right? So you would configure all of your physical connectivity for the Fabric under Fabric, and then you do the logical kind of stuff on top of all of that under your actual tenants. So just kind of keeping that in mind. All right, so I'm not going to go ahead and go through all of the interface policies. I think we've done that before, and it's relatively straightforward stuff. But what we do need to do is create a VPC interface policy group, because I haven't created one of those yet. So we're just going to go ahead and say this is Presidio VPC policy. We won't even do that. We're just going to go ahead and do default there. We'll enable CDP just for fun. Port channel policy, we're going to select LACP active. We're going to hook it to the AEP that I've been using. That's really all we need to do here. There's nothing kind of crazy. Simple policy group stuff. So you can see now we've got our different type, our port channel or VPC interface. Kind of doing all the same stuff, nothing interesting. The next thing we need to do, as with kind of configuring any physical stuff, is we need to create an interface profile. So we'll just go ahead and say that this is, typing is hard, Presidio VPC 10. I'll just say that because that's what I did on my 3560. Then we'll go ahead and do our interface selectors under our Presidio. Presidio VPC 10 install. And it's on port 17. We got to hook it to our VPC interface policy group. Remember, that's just LACP active, and I put CDP on just for funsies. So say OK, that's cool. So now we know what interfaces and what policy is on each of those interfaces, but we don't know anything about VPC domains or what switches they're actually connected to, right? So port 117 on who knows what switch. So it's not a attached one, so we got to do that. So one of the things that kind of screwed me up a little bit was I didn't configure this VPC domain. So I was kind of thinking, okay, well, default seems, fine. Dead pure interval, that's cool. Nothing fancy there. And I kind of didn't see, and I still don't see actually, how this gets hooked to an actual pair of switches. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're just going to go ahead and create a VPC domain policy. So I'm going to go ahead and say VPC 101. 102, because that's the domain or the pair of leafs that I'm going to be using. So just say OK. We don't need to monkey with that unless you had some specific reason to do so. Then we'll go ahead and do a switch policy here, switch profile, excuse me. So we'll go ahead and say Presidio VPC 10. And we're going to go ahead and say switch pro, and then we'll just copy that. And we'll just say switch selector, and then we're going to go ahead and select 101 and 102. We'll go ahead and say next. Go select our interface selector that we created earlier, here, VPC 10 profile. And that's the interface profile that's calling the interface selector that's selecting port 117 on both switches. And so now we're just kind of hooking it all up to the actual switch itself. Say OK, finish. So now we've got, this is the switch profile. So you can see we're selecting blocks 101 to 102. So those are both of my leafs, the only two leafs I have, right? My test fabric here. And then the associated interface selector, which is the actual interface profile here. So that's this guy. And then the interface profile is actually pointing to this interface selector, which is tied to the policy group that says LACP active, because that's how I configured my 3560, and saying, hey, port 117. So we got back over here. So we had independent there before because they weren't bundled. And so now we've got passive on both sides there. See if we see CUP. No, that CUP is not coming across just yet, but that's all right. So the one thing I kind of want to circle back on is this VPC domain. I'm going to do a little bit more research because I'm not in NXOS mode, you would configure a VPC domain with your peer link and your peer keep alive. ACI, you don't need a peer link or a peer keep alive, right? Because the fabric abstracts a lot of that kind of magic, and I'm sure there's some black magic on the background that's creating like a pseudo peer link or pseudo peer keep alive that we don't actually have to worry about because the fabric's taking care of it. But what I don't know just yet is how this domain actually gets hooked to this, our actual VPC config. So how does it know that, I created it and named it 101, 102 because those are the only two leaves in my fabric. But how does it know that it's actually hooked to 101 and 102? And since it's not hooked, why does default not work? So we can go ahead and delete this guy and just see what happens here. So we should, let's see if, let's just bump that port channel real quick. And so both of those went down. So what was happening earlier is I was getting half of my link up. 21 was coming up as P, passive, right? It's happy. And 22 was always I, or waiting. So it looks like we're now up and down, basically. I'll just kind of keep giving that a refreshing. So there we go. H, so hot standby. And P, okay. So see, I'm not 100% sure what's hooking it to that. So we'll have to figure that out. It's a great mystery of VPCs and ACI. But it's a pretty simple overall procedure, other than I do want to do a little bit more research in that. Just a quick rundown again. Policy group, in my case, LACP active was important. You got to have it hooked to an AEP that's doing some stuff. Got to create your switch profile, or your interface profile, which then in turn calls your interface selectors. And then you got to create your switch profile, which is calling your switch selectors and also your interface selectors. And that's lumping it all together, and that's making VPC magic work in ACI. So hopefully I'll do some digging and figure out what's up with the VPC domain, and then I'll come back and make another video and kind of talk about what I learned.